Welcome to part 8 in our Ableton Live sound design series. We're dealing with basslines in this series, and my name's Tom, and I'm going to today we're going to look at a kind of a techno bassline, a minimal techno bassline, but what the main focus is going to be, we're going to look at using both automation and modulation. Remembering automation in Ableton is what you actually do up here on the timeline, whereas modulation you do down in the envelope view. We're going to use these two together to create a very nice, long, progressive sounding tune. So as usual, I've got a kick, snare, and some hi-hats, and I've just got a loop here. This is so we've got something to go by while we're listening and while we're constructing a bassline. Very standard. So what we're going to do, insert a MIDI clip, like usual, a MIDI track, rename it to bassline. And I usually leave the E out. And we're going to drag in an operator into here. And let's just put in some notes. Now for this one, I'm going to use something which isn't that melodic. It's still going to be in a key, but we're gonna use lots of glide and lots of moving around. So actually the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into this operator here. We've just got a sine wave. I think we'll just stick with the sine wave for now. If we go over into the the pitch panel here, we've got this glide knob. Now we can turn this on and we can bring up the time. Now what this means is this when we have this on, it glides between notes. So if we've got a note and then we've got another note, a different pitch, we can actually make those two notes glide to each other, as in the pitch bends up to the next note or down to the next note, depending on how long we have this time value set. Now this is fun. Let's just insert some notes. We'll go down here. We're using a sine wave. Just going to put in a G and then a minor third above that, and then we'll go up to that'll be good. Now what we want to do is we want those notes to glide. So what we're going to do is we need to go back over here into our global shell over here, and we need to change the voices to 1. Now the voices are how many notes can play at one time. So if we have that set to 2, what happens is when we have 2 notes overlapping, it'll actually play 2 bass notes at once, which is a very bad thing to happen. We don't want that to happen, so we're going to set that to 1. And the reason we do that is because now if we go in here and we drag these notes back so they overlap the ones before them, you'll actually hear a bit of a glide happen. So let's solo this track. You can hear that glide. If I bring the glide up a lot, you'll be able to hear it a lot better. And I'm just going to repeat this pattern. I'm going to hold down Option. I'm going to drag this across. And I just move that one up to the octave, and I'll bring this note back as well, just so it glides for us. Very cool. Now of course if we listen with the kick, it's going to be muddy. So as usual, we're going to chuck in a compressor, side chain it, and take the audio from the kick, and let's bring the threshold down. Get rid of that loop. We'll just have the kick for now. Going to bring a bit more glide. Maybe a bit less. Bit more. That's sounding good. Now that's pretty much our sub bass sorted, so we can actually just leave that as it is for now. What I'm going to do as usual is I'm going to right click and group this into an instrument rack, so we can actually add another chain in here. And I'm going to add in another operator, surprise surprise, into this chain. We'll call this one sub as usual, and we'll call this one high as usual. So now we can solo this high part of the bass line. And you notice we don't have the glide and we don't have the voices done properly, so let's do that again. One voice, and we'll put the glide on. But the fun part here is let's change this to a saw wave. Let's bring the time up a bit. Very cool. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to EQ after this. I'm going to put an EQ8. I'm just going to muck around with some frequencies here. Of course we don't need the bass, so we click on that pole and turn it into a high pass. Just give it a bit of snap. So just changing the Q there. That sounds good for now. And just to give it a little bit of feel to it, I'm going to chuck in an auto filter after it. I'm going to use this notch filter, which we don't use very often. A notch filter takes frequencies away, remember. So as we move this along, you see how it subtracts frequencies just from that little notch. A bandpass subtracts them from the outside, a notch filter subtracts them from the inside. And this is good because now, with this high bass, we can give it some LFO. Let's take the phasing off so it's not spinning around stereo. Bring the rate right down. Give it a bit more Q. That just gives it a wee bit of modulation, very subtle. And I'm going to use the spread function again, remembering this splits the signal to the left and to the right and then detunes them slightly. Really good way to get a bit of space. I'm going to change the rate down really low on this auto filter so that modulation happens really slowly. Very cool, I'm happy with that. Now I'm going to chuck an auto filter again after this. We're going to use this as a low pass filter. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to automate this, or modulate if you like, this frequency cutoff point here. We're going to get some kind of cool rhythm that we can work with. So I'm going to open up this MIDI clip, go into the envelope mode. You see how the frequency of the auto filter is already selected because it's the last thing we got to play with. Remember, these drop down menus means this is the device you're working with, so we're working with the auto filter, and then this is the parameter of the device we want to play with, which is the frequency. So let's zoom in. Oh, we don't have to do it there. Let's modulate this here in this window here. Remember, this is relative, so if we have this on 0%, this is going to be relative to whatever the frequency is actually set at. So if I have this up very, very, very high, actually we'll set this in the middle, like so. So now if we bring this line down, it's going to go down low. If we bring it up, it's going to be high, plus 50%, negative 50%, and that's relative. That percentage is relative to where this frequency point is. We're going to keep it in the middle, keep it nice and simple. So let's start moving this line around and start getting some cool stuff going on. Let's just select some bits and drag this down. Bring this all up. Let's just copy this across. Just giving it a wee bit of a curve. And of course we can bring that sub back in now. Well, the reason I've used modulation here is because now we can do this fun part of we can stretch everything out over a long period of time. Like so, all of these loops, stretch them out, stretch them out, stretch them out. And because this modulation is relative to what the frequency is actually set at of that auto filter, if we have a look at that auto filter now, which is in this high part, we go over here, here's my auto filter, I can actually click on this frequency and I can automate it, but it's going to be modulated at a percentage of what the automation is. So if I bring this down very, very low, remember that automation we did is only relative to this, so that modulation is going to be moving around down here, and we can actually open this up over a period of time so that modulation continues to happen, but it gets more and more and more intense. So I'll bring this back as well, bring all of this back like this, bring it back, bring this down. So let's have a listen as this progresses. You can see the filter just starting to open up. Bring in the hi-hats. Bring in the loop. Instant progression, and it's really cool because all we've had to do is change one line, and because the modulation is happening all throughout this, it's going to continuously open up. Lots of fun. Now, one other thing we could do here, which would be quite fun, is we actually have a sidechain in the auto filter. Not many people know this. The sidechain works in a similar way that the sidechain works for the compressor. So you can take the audio from something, but then you can make that affect the envelope of this filter here. So, for example, if I take it from the snare, let's have a listen here. We'll skip ahead so it's nice and open. Maybe here. See, it's taking it from the snare. So if I put the envelope up, every time the snare hits, this frequency, this envelope on the filter cutoff is actually going to do something. If we bring the gain up of the sidechain amount, it's how drastic it'll affect it. Let's bring it down and see what happens. Every time that snare hits, it's subtracting, it's doing a wee slant downwards of the cutoff point. One other fun thing we can do is we can use a return track here. Remember, a return sits away on the side waiting for some kind of input. We can load up effects onto it, but they only kick in when we turn this value up, which sends them to that input, which is this A return here. We could put a, let's put a filter delay over it. And what we'll do is we'll turn the middle one off, and we'll put the bandpass filters up very, very high. So what happens now is that delay is only going to kick in when a high note, one of those swoops upwards, plays. Should be pretty cool. Let's have a listen to see how that sounds. I'm going to take the dry value right down because we don't need it. We'll make sure we turn the send up. Not sure the filter delay is the right thing, so let's just chuck in an auto filter here to do that filtering for us. We'll turn it into a high pass. We'll keep it quite high. If we solo this channel, so you can hear just the high stuff's coming through on this return track. Let's add a reverb. It's always fun. And let's put a auto pan on it. An auto pan basically spins things from the left to the right. See, as I bring up the amount, you can see that it'll pan things, it'll sway things left and right, depending on what this rate is here. You can hear it going from left to right. So let's listen to that all together. Very, very cool. Let's go back into this bass line. Let's add in, just for fun, let's duplicate this high channel. So we've got 2 copies of the high channel now. It copies everything, all the automation and everything. Let's call this high 2. Let's change this to something like add a square wave, see what happens. Let's put it up an octave higher, and let's bring the volume down. Give it a lot more spread. Very cool. So that's the kind of things you can do with automation and modulation, making them work together. If you get into the habit of doing modulation to a parameter, so you don't actually click on a parameter and change the automation and click on points and stuff, if you get into the habit of doing it automation, then if you want to actually make things progress throughout a phrase of your tune, it's a lot easier to do. So that's the whole concept of that. Yeah, I hope you got something from that, and yeah, stay tuned for the next one, which is number 8, bassline number 9 will be, sorry, number 9, and I'm going to save this project and make it available, Pro Member section. If you're a Pro Member, you can go download this and have a play. Cheers, tomcosm.com.